It has finally arrived. The Titan Gate version 2 rear wired has arrived, so we can now continue with part 2 in rebuilding the M4. Very excited to do this, and we're looking forward to get this back together. Now, what I've noticed in the gearbox, as you can see, is the safety latch actually has to come out. So because the version 2 will sit into there, it has its own braking system, so it'll also read gear positioning, etc. But the main thing is it will provide its own safe, so the existing mechanical safety has to go. So just a Phillips screwdriver, you take that latch off, and then the backing plate will come out like so. When it comes out, there is a steel lever on the inside of the gearbox, again a Phillips screw that we have to undo. Remove that completely. If you look actually at the gate Titan, there is a round circle just down the bottom right of the screen with a little arrow. That is where we will need to screw the original mechanical switch, which they unscrewed a while ago on the last video. I'm just going to remove the top gear out, leaving only one gear in the gearbox, so it allows me to clearly run the cabling without coming into much problems. It is pretty idiot proof putting this in, because there is a steel pin that sticks through the gearbox which locates in one of the holes, and the other hole will line up with the screw hole. So I'm just fixing that screw in. It comes with in a packet a screw with a steel washer and a rubber washer, just to make sure you get the orientations correct, and it should be fine. Just be a bit careful when you actually put this in, because there are sensors on it and it's quite delicate. So again, it is very fiddly, I won't lie to you. Putting these gears in and out are a pain, but as you can see, I've fed the cables around on the same layout as the old cabling layout. The only difference on this one is the negative cable, the black, will run to the front of the handle, and the red will run to the rear, positive. Just, that's very simple. You just orientate the motor 180 degrees, and everything should be fine as long as they're put in the right place. The tappet plate, as you can see here, I've actually changed the nozzle from the standard one. It's 22mm nozzle, I believe. Just pull that out to replace it with the one by Maxx, which is a CNC nozzle, which will coincide with the Maxx CNC ICS Pro hopper. So they'll both sit nicely into each other. Now this will allow me to put the new cylinder head and cylinder into position over the tappet. It's a bit tricky to slide in, but once it goes in, it should slide in. There you go, pops in the thing. And that's the next sort of section we want to put in. Now I'm actually just putting the two gears back into position, which are already shimmed at the bottom. I will place just 3 shims on, one shim on each gear at the top, just to stop it from rattling, because it's it's high torque, high speed. I'm just now placing the piston into the cylinder, making sure that the steel teeth are facing to the bottom, because they have to locate on the gear. And then there's a little pin and spring, and it's just a case of pulling the spring over into place and popping it in, you can see. So that's all sat into place. On the tappet, the new nozzle. The next thing is to drop the aftermarket trigger, the Dragon, I believe. Little spring sits on the back, puncture the hole, and that little arm there sits on the bottom of the gearbox. It is very fiddly. You need a bit of finesse to get in, but a little bit of arguing with yourself. You get you'll get it to line up the hole, pop in. Once it's in, it's solid. With that in, allows me to get the other side of the PCB board from the Titan. It's only one orientation, it can only go in one way, so you can't get this wrong. Again, be very careful when you are pushing this in. You don't want to bend any of these contactors, but once you've got it located, just lightly add a bit of pressure in, it should fall into place. So once that's in, we can then just put the top casing of the gearbox, the other half, making sure that you're not going to pinch any cables, that the cable's in there. This wasn't the first time, it was a bit tricky. I had to sort of make sure that all the cables are pushed down far enough so it won't create any pinch points. What I'm doing now is only just putting 2 screws in on either side, and I'll just pinch them up and have a quick inspection around it, just to make sure that everything is sat where it needs to be and that we're not damaging anything, because obviously these MOSFETs, there's a lot of sensors in them, and it can be fairly simple to break and damage these, so you want to be fairly careful when you have put this gearbox back together. But as I can see, the cables are free, there's no pinch points, it all seems to be sitting nicely together. There's freedom in the trigger as well as the nozzle, so the tappet plate's not catching anything, it all looks good to me. So I will now, once I'm happy with everything, I will lock all these other screws in. Obviously we have the little spring that sits in the little notch, and the latch will come down for the bolt release. This is a little fiddly, and I found on the Ethereans, don't pinch that screw too much because it will prevent it from moving. So this is the Titan with the USB. At this point I actually set up, it comes with a USB-C and like the Samsung connector, but I have a USB-C connector for my Huawei, and I briefly set up the trigger position back at that point, but I will do another video on that. But I was happy with everything was in place, everything seemed to be moving freely, everything was fairly solid. Now the only other thing when assembling this gun is obviously the selector plate. Now I can point out there just 3 small little sensors. They're the ones that pick up the position of the selector plate, because it's in a dark color. I mean, this is blue, a lot of them are black, they are varied, but the sensors do struggle to see these. So what what they give you is obviously 9 little stickers, and they do advise if you use the little black line and put that to the left hand edge of the little square section here. So it has to be in line with that line across the top. So it has to be perfectly in line with this top line, and the black line has to be to the left hand side of that. It is fiddly, and you have to use a little bit of finesse. All I did is I put the very top left hand corner, just pinch that down with my nail just to get it to bite just on the corner, so I got the first position in, and then I could easily then just straighten it up along that other edge, and once I'm happy that that's straight, then it was just a case of just pressing it in. It does really stress that this position is quite vital, and you make sure it's pushed down properly, because when you are calibrating, it can cause you problems when you are trying to set this gun up for your safe, semi and full auto settings. So with the selector plate back into place, we are now free to continue to assemble the rifle. So what we're going to do is put the gearbox into the low receiver. Again, these are new cables, they want to go their own direction, so be a little bit mindful when you are placing these in. So the battery goes through the large hole, and the 2 wires for the motor has to go through the hole at the bottom to the handle. So all I do is I gently feed it in and feed the cable at the same time, because they're new, very stiff, and then just make sure the trigger is located in the hole, so like so, and then ease it down, making sure that back cable is not going to pinch on the edge, and then just a little squeeze, and there we go, the gearbox is back into place. So with the gearbox in situ, we want to look at putting the first pin in, which is in this corner here. Sped it up here, so not to prolong it too much, just make sure you got your pins the right orientation around. So the moon shape is the front of the gun and the full circle is the rear. Then you put your trigger pin in, which I've pushed, just slide it in so far, and it just needs a little tap just to send it home. I did check through to make sure there's no cables in the way, but I knew I fed everything out of the way anyway, but it's always safe to double check. So the trigger pin's in, so that's shored up the gearbox in the lower. So we are now in a position there where we can put the bolt release catch on this. Again, the Ethereans are different to a lot of the manufacturers. It has this this latch as an extra, because it's a British owned company and they've sort of took some thought to it, and I appreciate it. I do like the fact that if I can pull the bolt back, it locks into place, allowing me the freedom to adjust the hop up. It just, unfortunately, it sits through and around the front edge of the gearbox, as you can see through the hole, and then by pushing the plate down the back, it'll locate near the hole, and once that's in, it's done. I've done this quite a few times now that it doesn't really bother me anymore. First time it was very stressful. So and that's it. Once that's into place, I just lightly tap the hammer to get that pin to fire flush there. So that's in place now. Okay, and then that has really shored that up. That's nice and tight now. We can look at putting the magazine release. So we will drop that in, flip it over, drop the spring in, put the end on, small Phillips screw, push it in to make sure it works properly. Now we want to look at putting the handle on and the spring, because these are external springs for these. Wind it up, be a bit careful and tighten it in, they're under a lot of tension. So you got your 2 wires for your 2 contactors. I've just turned the motor around so that if red for red, black for black, plus and minus, nice and easy. These are all straight, so I just located them in first, pushed them in, got the motor to sit down, then just bent the contactors over, fed the cables around so it's nice and neat, and then eased it in and then tightened the 2 screws up as usual. So we just put the ring on, and now the stock tube, which again, like on my last video, I explained how that goes in. It's key weighed, just tying up the castellated nut. So that's now done. So it's a case of putting the barrel and the hop up back in the upper receiver. Okay, and then the lower receiver just slides into the upper receiver, and I just push it down and get that pin into place. It takes a little bit of finesse, a little bit of wriggling, because there's a spring inside the hop up, so it does fight against you a little bit. So you just got to look through it and make sure it all fits in there. Then feed the cable through in, the stock on, and that is gun complete. I will do another video on the setting up of the MOSFET, but we'll catch you on the next time.